Men are meant for biting down their tongue, not speaking about anything. That's what it is to be a man. When I was younger, I thought, to be a man is all these kind of like traditional things that people think, they're very like strong and masculine and talk with a deep voice or whatever. But now I think it's just to have the confidence to be where you're at the moment. If you want to be macho in the moment, then that can be the masculine thing. If you want to be vulnerable with someone, that's a masculine thing. I think that process of boys to men was what I wanted to write about. If you go to physiotherapy to get better for your leg getting hurt, you tell people and they go, cool, you're getting better. If you tell someone you're going to therapy for your mind, they go, what's wrong with you? Something's not quite right. The idea that if you're going through a mental battle or struggle, you just need to kind of like not talk about it, because if you do speak about it, you're going to get made fun of for doing so. To anyone who's had a panic attack, they're no joke. They can mimic heart attacks, they can mimic all these different things in your body that goes into fight or flight. Social media is potentially the driving force where we can see millions of different lives every single day at our fingertips. And naturally we fall into this idea of comparison. And I think the comparison is breeding this idea of I need to fit more in, I need to do more, I need to move to here or there, I need to show people the edited highlights, the best bits. And I think that's creating this worry and this anxiety of, oh God, I'm running out of time, I don't have enough time to do it. It can just relay in loads of really dangerous ways. It's a false thought to young minds. Irony of being in your 20s, but feeling like you're running out of time. I was deeply sad that I wasn't going to have that connection with someone again, a real mother, someone who's related to me like that. And I think it seems really obvious, but he just said, she's always with you, whether it's the memories you keep or the way you look in a mirror and you have the same eyes, all these little things that no one can take away from you. No one can take the memories away from you. And I think that's always just made me feel a bit brighter about it.
It's my belief that too many societal problems persist because we keep relying on the same ways of thinking. Question the Default exists to challenge the norms that shape our society, dismantling the status quo and exploring better alternatives for how we live and manage our health and well-being. Question the Default is for those who are driven to create a better future. If this mission resonates with you, please consider subscribing, liking or sharing. Every single small action helps us on our mission. Thank you. In this episode, we sit down with Dan Whitlam, singer and songwriter. Dan has an incredible way with words. If you don't know his work, I would encourage you to listen. He's just released his new book and is about to go on tour. What an amazing journey he has had so far. I think Dan has an incredible way to capture the experiences of a number of people in their 20s, especially young men. He talks about love, relationships, masculinity and mental health, but it all comes from kind of this deep-rooted trauma that he's experienced at various stages in his life. But through that trauma, he has created his own identity, an identity that has, yes, been shaped by his trauma, but also he's able to now use that to help many, many young people, encourage people to slow down, actually not settle, but actually find their own way through, setting their own milestones. I'm very grateful for his work. It's personally helped me. And I think it's going to go a long, long way to helping a large number of people access almost therapeutic ways of thinking through their own self-reflection and journaling ability that his words allow you to get to that place too. So I'm looking forward to you listening to this episode and I can't wait to hear your reflections. Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on. How are you?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I made it in okay. So thank you for having me.
Brilliant. No, I'm so excited for this. I think I've kind of listened to your kind of words like quite often. I get myself into quite kind of like deep emotional space listening to kind of your words. I found myself like the perfect balance is running early morning when I'm kind of in the need of that kind of like dopamine kind of hit, putting on your music, running for a long period of time, and I suddenly find myself going quite deep into my childhood, into my future, and it's your words really do connect with me in a way that I don't think any music has, and I hand on heart mean that.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, very, very powerful. So the fact that we were able to kind of get you on and kind of be intrigued by this was quite a moment for us as well. So
yeah.
But where did it all start for you then? I know like you've had like quite a kind of unique, everyone's got a unique childhood, I guess, but you've had like a lot of culture mixed in and obviously, significant trauma as well. Like, it'd be lovely if you could take us on a bit of a journey, I guess, through your childhood.
Yeah, of course. I think I was at my sister got married recently and I was speaking to some of my family and they said the weird irony is that I was kind of very silent and not quite mute, but I was completely silent until about the age of like 5. And I was just like full of energy, quite like an erratic kid. Did a lot of sport, but the irony being that kind of, my words are my main sort of thing now, my currency. But yeah, I grew up in Russia and Turkey. I grew up in Istanbul in Turkey in a place called Arnavutköy, and then in Russia in St. Petersburg. And I think at the time I was convinced that my dad was like a spy or something. I was like, surely you work for MI6. But no, he worked for Gillette, sort of selling razor blades. Was really good at languages basically. And I guess that kind of the idea of like language was sort of instilled in me quite young. And music-wise, like my dad's amazing at piano and he sings a lot, and he'd also always be playing sort of like REM, Elton John, Billy Joel, people like that. So they're kind of like proper like singer-songwriters. And then when we were in Turkey, my mum got ill, and we went back to London for sort of healthcare, and she sadly passed away. So I lost my mum when I was about 8 years old. So me and my two sisters were raised by my dad. And I think also, with this podcast, and certainly with, what you've gone through as well, I think there's the idea of having really strong male role models has really been apparent in my life. And also then looking to my sisters as, super strong female role models and what I can learn from them. But yeah, then I went to school in London, and I kind of found drama and acting and being on stage basically when I was at school. And I think being at school and being on stage was the first time I felt real sort of like self-worth, and that came from being on stage and just being able to escape and be something else. And then I went to drama school because, if I'm honest, I didn't really have a subject, didn't know what to study. I felt very lost. And then at drama school, I was able to kind of really hone in on what I wanted to do, which was acting, but then more specifically poetry and music. And I started writing at drama school, and I'm sure we'll go into this more later on, but I kind of started writing at drama school, and then I left and I did bits of acting. And after that, I kind of I kept sitting being like, I'm bored of waiting for my agent to call me. I need to do something else that I can do in my own time. And I started putting things out online and released my first song, and then I found my label, and kind of built from there. But that's a very like brief, condensed version of everything that's going on.
You've got such a powerful way with words. Was that when you look back in your childhood, were you doing that at that point, in your like early days in like primary school and secondary school, were you able to articulate yourself and your emotions in the way that you are today?
I don't think so, no. I think, like I said, I was really mad on sports. I played for Fulham Football Club when I was 11 years old in the academy. And then I got dropped when I was 13, and I subsequently turned my back on football. I said, I'm going to support from a distance. I'm not going to play it again. And I was just mad about sports, just doing it all the time. And that was my kind of my escape, like, doing something physical. In the same way that you said, you go for a really long run and you can, get your dopamine and get everything out. I kind of did that. But I think it was only once I started, got to 16, 17, and I started listening to, my American kind of music with Tribe Called Quest, and then within the UK, people like Flip Tricks and Jam Baxter and these kind of Bristolian legends, and then over into London with the likes of, Lil Kana and Lil Sims and people like that. And I kind of sort of started listening to these different voices, and I started thinking, I want to express myself like that. And yeah, kind of just went from there. But I'd say it definitely happened around 16, 17, 18 that I started being able to use my voice a little bit more.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? That a bit that you're able to watch other people do that as well, and you kind of want a bit of that, and
it's inspiring as hell, right? Kind of like,
I think that's important. That you want to be able to kind of look at somebody else that's doing something similar and aspiring to that. I think that's something we talk about in a moment. I'm sure masculinity as well. That we need more role models like that. And like now, it seems to be that more people are connecting with kind of like spoken words. It feels like, is that kind of a naive, kind of lazy opinion of mine? It feels like younger people are wanting to engage with music and emotions in that way. Was that something that you kind of like seeing as a step change in the kind of sector, I guess, of music, or have like you contributed to that, do you think?
I think we've all seen these stereotypes that are hilarious, like in 22 Jump Street, where there's the scene with like, Cynthia dies for us. And it's kind of, I think for a long time, people assume spoken word poetry, you're putting on this voice. It's all quite, clicky and kind of, I don't know, it feels a bit cliquey. But I think the truth of it is like, if you're going through loss or a breakup or even love or, these kind of extremes on the spectrum of emotion, people time after time do return to music and to lyrics and to songs and to poems. And I think for something to be able to distill exactly how we're feeling can not only help ourselves better understand the emotion, but it can often help other people understand the emotions better. Yeah. And I think the amazing community that's now growing, and you see it with loads of different spoken word nights throughout London and throughout the UK, they're being grown massively by the online community. You see loads of people now taking to spoken word poetry, and I'm hesitant to say it's becoming like cooler, but it's becoming less of this kind of like, oh, you do poetry, that's really lame, like what you doing?
Yeah.
And for me, for sure, at school, I used to really hate poetry, and I think it's because I didn't find it relatable. But I think people are now finding they can relate to poetry that's online and things like that. So I don't know if I'm at the forefront of it, but if I'm kind of making any kind of an impact, which I hope I am, then I'm really grateful for the community growing, basically.
Yeah, amazing. And then, so I guess when you were going through kind of drama school, when was the kind of moment that you realized actually this can translate into music?
I think when I was younger, I always used to like freestyle rap with my friends, and we kind of throw each other words, and we kind of create verses from that. But I think I wrote my first kind of quite long piece of poetry at drama school about something that I'm sure we'll get onto later. But I put that to a sort of gentle piano backing track, and someone was saying, "Oh, this is really listenable, really relaxing." And then I started like copying what my heroes did and my icons did, and kind of kept practicing it. And then I just took a leap. I just released my first song, which is called Exit Sign. And then it got onto New Music Friday, which is quite a big sort of Spotify playlist. And I thought, I love this. I want to do this again and again. So yeah, it was a complete leap of faith, and I just sort of went for it, really.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, we're definitely going to get onto that probably that first kind of longer piece that you mentioned in a moment. And thank you for kind of like sharing about your loss. And I've read that in your kind of new book that's come out. And how I guess that kind of like lack of a mother figure, but the role that your dad played within that, like I kind of stuck with me quite vividly, really, because I thought I had the kind of opposite experience. That makes sense. Like I had two brothers as well, so I lost my dad. I had two brothers, and yours was kind of a different balance. But I could connect with something that you shared around when you kind of saw other people with a mother figure, and you kind of crave that. And like that was my biggest struggle growing up, was seeing other people have the kind of father figure and like the actual hug aspect of it, which you talk about. And I haven't heard anyone just explicitly capture exactly the thing that I struggled with. And I think what you've done from my reflection is being able to open up a separate way for men, especially those in their 20s and maybe kind of going into their 30s, to connect with their emotions and their past. And I think I've been able to go to a much deeper place purely by listening to how you reflect on your loss. And how now, like, I guess when you have young people coming up to you, like, do people talk about trauma and loss and how you've helped them, or like what are some of the kind of reflections people share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's amazing and quite overwhelming to see people relate to the way I speak about trauma and be able to put themselves into it. I think that's incredible. And that's the beauty of like writing and other people's stories, isn't it? We can reflect on our own. But yeah, I mean, even recently at the Cheltenham Literature Festival, which I did a few days ago, I had someone come up and they were really overwhelmed with emotion and started crying and sort of saying, it's really interesting hearing about your loss of your mum and how it's shaped you and what you've missed and what you've had, I guess. And just being able to put themselves in those shoes as well. And it's I mean, it's always interesting and not interesting. It's quite odd to see someone taken by emotion, because first of all, what I love is that someone has the confidence to be able to be vulnerable in front of me. But also that my words have sort of impacted in some way. And I do think that's the beauty of any kind of art. If you can make someone feel something, even if they hate it, at least it's something, So yeah, I always find it amazing when someone can relate in that regard.
Yeah, it's very powerful. It's I remember first form of therapy I ever accessed, like just after my dad died. They asked me to fill up a jar, like a empty like jam or Marmite or something like that. Not Marmite, actually, it's a bad example because it's dark coloured, but like it's something clear, and you're kind of filling different colours representative of like emotion attached to my dad that I lost, and I had to choose all these colours, and each one had a meaning to it, and then you take it away, and then you wrote down exactly what the meaning was. That was the only form of therapy I had until I was an adult, but it was artistic in that. There wasn't a huge amount of support for those that were bereaved by suicide at that point. But the thing is, I remember it. I remember the meaning. I remember the art. I know exactly where it is in my house. I remember the moment. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? If we could kind of bring in more of that kind of creativity during the early moments after trauma, I feel like we can connect with something that's kind of perhaps isn't happening within the therapeutic space as well. But so
100%.
But yeah, it's really interesting. And how, so your kind of childhood growing up, like experiencing two very kind of countries that many people do get to kind of live in. How was that?
It's actually mental to think back now that I lived in those two countries, but I think Russia I don't really remember. I've just got these photos that my dad's got of me in a kind of like snow starfish suit. I was there from very little, sort of like 0 to 3 if that's the age.
Okay.
And then, in Turkey, I was there for 5 years after that. So I remember that a lot more. But I just remember, the climate, and I remember more significantly, I remember my mum and like, her being around and everything that she did for me and my sisters. But I think I talk a lot about it in the book as well, this idea of, feeling lost and having to move on because, I was in this country where my friends were, and I was at school there, and I was finding a home, and then we had to leave. And it's horrible because I knew we were going back home to help my mum, but also because, I was pretty angry because I was like, why do we have to leave? I like it here. I want to stay. And I think that can happen anytime. You can be leaving your place of work, and you can be upset that you're moving on to the next thing. End of university, end of school. And I tried to talk about all of that in the book, just the ideas of how change can be really, really difficult but necessary, and how change often grows in the field of growth and stuff like that.
That's really powerful. And your dad was very proud of like the fact that, raising you, and then to the point now that you're able to express and help so many other people navigate their trauma.
Yeah, he's honestly like the proudest man in the world. He's like, he's got
Yorkshireman, right?
He's a Yorkshireman, and he recently got social media, and like, it's wild, just continuously posting like absolutely everything. But it's great. I had I performed at Coco last October in Camden, and we sold it out, which was amazing. But I brought my dad on stage for the penultimate song, and I kind of speak about him throughout the performance. And then he comes on second last song. The whole band leaves the stage, and my dad just sits down. And everyone's kind of like, "Oh, it's cute. Is his dad? But is he going to be any good, etc." And he kind of plays into it, like kind of walking very slowly on and stuff like that. And he sits down and he plays Vienna by Billy Joel.
Okay,
which is kind of, it plays into the whole idea of running out of time and slow down. You've got ages. But my dad's like unbelievable, like incredible. Just gives this piano an absolute schooling and sing, and everyone's like crying their eyes out at the end. And it's really beautiful. And I just remember in that moment looking at my dad. And I'm not a parent, but I imagine you often feel real pride for your children. But it was the first moment I looked at my dad, and I was kind of like, I'm so proud of you. I'm just so proud. And for the tour coming up that I'm doing, he's coming to the New York show to do the same sort of thing, which is really amazing. So I think it's amazing moments when you can look at your parents and kind of be like, I'm really proud.
Yeah, that is because you've witnessed so much of each other, right? And I am a parent because I guess when I listen to some of your words, obviously I know, I think you explain how you're not a parent, but you are putting yourself in the shoes of what it might feel like.
Absolutely,
which is really, I can definitely relate. But I also can see how that perhaps comes a lot from the relationship you have with your dad and what you experienced. Kind of the values that you have and this kind of way of seeing the world. Do you think a lot of that was kind of crafted or like kind of stimulated by your dad?
Yeah, absolutely. I think increasingly more so the relationship we've had in the last sort of like 5 years, which is when I've been doing the majority of my writing. I think when I was younger, like my dad told me that his dad never hugged him. He never gave him any real kind of I guess like outward sort of love that you'd want from a father figure.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I think, or throughout my whole life, I think he set out to do exactly the opposite of that. And he was really supportive, really, really loving as a father. I think often when I was younger, we didn't really speak about these ideas of like men's mental health as a thing. It just didn't exist. He wouldn't speak about it. If I was upset or going through something about school or whatever it was, he'd kind of be like, "You okay? Yeah? All right, cool. Let's move on." And I think it's only now that perhaps I'm able to articulate what I'm feeling or what I'm going through that my dad's actually able to sit and listen. And bless him, because my dad's got Tourette syndrome. So to kind of sit silently and listen to someone is like really difficult. So in the moments when he is able to just like sit and lock in, he's amazing. And I think he's just got better and better as men have started speaking more about mental health. And I think we were speaking earlier about these incredible people, like sadly the late Ricky Hatton, and people who are like outwardly speaking about men's mental health in different spheres, whether it be from a sports perspective or from a literature perspective. And it's kind of, I think the more my dad's got into it, the more he's kind of locked into speaking to me about that. I don't know if that answered your question.
That's quite nice, isn't it? The fact that he's also gone on a journey with your work, that he's able to perhaps express himself. And I remember, I can't remember if it's in the book or on a separate podcast I listened to what you shared, but there is certain songs that he really leans into, perhaps connected to your mum as well. So there was always, which kind of really stuck to me. And again, I think I and my family also have something kind of similar, and there's kind of these very meaningful songs that will just forever resonate with those particular moments in time.
Yeah.
So what was life like when you moved to, not moved to London, but growing up in London teenager, going through the kind of, the schools that you did, and then going into kind of the 20s, which so much of your book and your work is about living in your 20s. What was that kind of like early 20s period like for you? What were you doing at that time?
So during that time I was, so just before I went to drama school, I was working in London. I was working in a yogurt shop. And I was just kind of there, just like working along. And it was a bit of a strange one because I was seeing my friends go off to university and, go and study. And I just knew that I wanted to go to drama school. That's what I wanted to do. And I applied and I didn't get in. And I got really hard on myself. And I was kind of like, okay, I failed. What am I going to do now? And a close friend of mine just said, you've got more time. Why don't you just reapply next year? And I sort of thought, okay, I'll do that. And I really said it for myself. I kind of said, if I don't get in this time, I'm gonna have to think of something else. And people always talk about like, don't have a plan B, just focus on plan A. But for me, that really was kind of like, I need an indication or just something. I don't know if that's helpful to say or not, but that's just where I was at. And and then I got into drama school, and I think I found a lot more direction. And at school, I was quite naughty. I couldn't concentrate very well, and I became a bit of the class clown. And I think at drama school I did that a bit as well. I kind of I wanted the uni experience, so I'd still try and go out with my friends, and it was very much a vocational training. You're there from 9 till 7 every single day, but I turn up a bit late. I kind of muck around a bit. And I think it was only with my writing that I found we had to do something called it's called Creative Evening at drama school, and you can do anything creative. And there's an amazing show called Chewing Gum written by Michaela Cole, and it came from this Creative Evening. But I wrote this poem at drama school that was about, I'm sure we'll come onto it, but me getting stabbed when I was 16. And I performed that at the Creative Evening. And I think after that moment in my 20s, for sure, I just found a lot more direction. I found that anything I was going through, I could write about it. Almost as if in this kind of poetic, like journal almost. And if I really wanted to share it with others, I'd do that and go to a little underground nights and stuff like that. But I just found a lot more direction after drama school, I'd say.
This episode is brought to you in support of Calm, the campaign against living miserably. Calm is a leading UK suicide prevention charity on a mission to help people end their misery, not their lives. We both do things differently. We both know we need to change the conversation around suicide, and that's why together we're both creating space to question the defaults that shape the way we think, feel, and talk about suicide and mental health. We're opening up conversations that remind people, whatever you are facing, you're not alone. Calm has loads of tools and resources available to anyone online to help you find the support that you need, including a life-saving helpline for people open every day from 5 p.m. to midnight, as well as vital online resources for anyone who needs them. So if you or someone you know needs to talk, please visit thecalmzone.net. Thank you for being part of this. And of course, today we may touch on conversations about suicide in this episode. Together, we can question the defaults that keep people silent, smash the stigma around suicide, and help build a world where no one has to face it alone. Thank you. Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. So that evening was set up. So how was this initiated by?
So there's a guy called Ken, very kind of like whimsical guy at drama school, and it's called Creative Evening, and you can kind of bring anything you want to share. And I brought this sort of 10, 11 minute long poetic, like I guess rap poem, and kind of delivered it to everyone there. And afterwards, one of the teachers came up to me and they were like, you've really got something there. You should explore that more. And then I went on to perform that in a sort of underground dive bar in Dalston, and a producer from BBC Radio 4 was there and came up and said, I'd like to commission this. And that was the moment that everything kind of started moving in my head, at least. Like, I want to do this. This is what I want to do more of. So, you spoke earlier about turning trauma into art, and if we could have more access to this in schools or youth clubs or wherever it is, even prisons, just, places where you can kind of get things out in an artistic fashion. For me, although it was awful, getting stabbed led to me finding this artistic outlet. Yeah. Because without that, I wouldn't have potentially found this force of writing. So I'm not saying I'm grateful for it, but I'm just saying it absolutely acted as a catalyst towards something.
Definitely. There's like so many bits there that had to work out, didn't they? You know, this very awful traumatic moment, but then there was actually a creative outlet, a space, an idea for actually, let's give this open window into an evening where people can share what they like. The fact that those two things happened, it's like, how do we learn from that for the masses and create 100%. These creative spaces where people can vent and express their trauma or something meaningful to them? I love it. And yeah, if you don't mind, you were stabbed in your teenage years. It's something that you do write about, and it's incredibly powerful. And somewhat like I was shocked when I heard it for the first time, like how kind of open you were about it, but also like what followed after. Are you able to take us back to that moment?
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah. So I'm trying to remember the exact date, but it was February the 6th in 2013, I think. And I was going to an audition for a Edinburgh Fringe play with a young theatre group that I'd been doing some work with. And I went to the audition and I came out. And when I came out, I saw that my friend was getting mugged. And you've met me. I'm quite a tall guy, and I was this height since
unexpectedly actually.
There's a lot of height. But I've been this height since I was like 16, 15. And I think stupidly I sort of saw my friend getting mugged, and there was two people there who were roughing him up, and I sort of without thinking just ran over. And I ran over and I pushed the guy who was mugging him and punching him, and I then got into a fight. And as that happened, these 4 guys came out of the estate opposite, and I got stabbed twice in the back with a screwdriver, which punctured my lung, and which I didn't know at the time, but adrenaline is wild. But I basically started running down the street away from the group that was chasing me, and I got to the bottom. They kind of filtered off, and I just remember turning to my friend, and I was like, I feel weird. And there's the sensation when you get a dead leg that your whole leg turns completely numb, and I just had that all down my back. And I said to my friend, like, something's not right, and I lifted up my shirt, and he was just like, Dan, you've been stabbed. And it was a really strange moment, because then I started having all these thoughts about what's going to happen next, what's happened before, what do I do? So I just called an ambulance and I said, look, I've been stabbed. Can you get here? And like, testament to the NHS, and this is why I have so much love for the NHS, and for many other reasons. But for me, it must have felt like an hour, but they were there in probably about 5 minutes. They got me, they took me on board. They said, do you want anyone with you? I just said, can I have my best friend George with me? Came on board, went to the hospital, and they gave me it's called a lung drain, basically, and they kind of get all the liquid out so you can breathe again. But yeah, that was the event essentially. But in terms of physically, I was out within 2 days.
Okay.
But mentally, I really struggled with panic attacks afterwards. I struggled with having my dad chaperone me everywhere, because first of all, he was scared, but also I was scared. I was a scared 16-year-old that it would happen again. And I think during that time, kids want to taste freedom, and you want to be able to go out with your mates. And I think the fact that I was getting chaperoned everywhere felt a bit strange. I felt lame. And then I think also just the idea that my lung collapsed. I kept thinking that was spontaneously happening again and again.
Okay.
So I had these panic attacks where I think my lungs weren't working, and it got so bad and went on for a good year and a bit that I got one of those oxygen meters on your finger.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of got one of those just to check that I was all healthy and okay. Exactly. So yeah, it kind of went on like that, and I think you spoke about what happened afterwards, and essentially sort of 2-3 years later, I took part in this program which is called Restorative Justice, which essentially it works in adult prisons and it works in juvenile detention centres, where charities or inner workings of the prison or juvenile detention centre can organise a sort of meet where the perpetrator can meet the person they've sort of done wrong. And I kind of while trying to retrieve my coat that was used for evidence at the time, I kind of came across this, and I thought about it a lot, and I wanted to meet the person who stabbed me. And so I went to the juvenile detention centre and met the charity and the officers involved. And it wasn't some grand give me a hug moment. It wasn't very romantic, but I was able to gain some peace from this boy who was also 16 at the time, now 2 years older, talking to me and saying, I'm sorry for what I did. Here's what I've done, but here's what I'm going to do. And I think I've always been a strong believer in rehabilitation, but also people, having made a mistake. I think especially at that age. And yeah, I kind of got that story, and then I wrote this poem about me getting stabbed, and then it resets, and it's the boy who stabbed me. And you find these mirrored moments where I pass a homeless person, fabricated, but it's telling to what happened. And in the poem, the other boy passes the homeless person and sits down with them. And I wanted to show that there was no witch hunting or victimization. It was like an honest account. It wasn't us versus them. It's kind of maybe just two 16-year-olds who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's the kind of the summary of what happened, basically.
Yeah, you have such a admirable way of kind of making sense of what happened to you, and it's very calming. And I can't help but think that if more people had that view, we'd have a much more open world where more people can have a second chance. And 16 years old, it makes sense how people can get into those wrong time and those wrong moments, and have not much luck in the process. But at the same time, it takes a process for them to see that actually there's a second chance, and then be open-minded people and willing victims, essentially.
Absolutely.
How does that make you feel that you've gone through that process? Because you don't hear of many people do that.
No, and don't get me wrong, like there are horrors and atrocities that happen in the world, and I'm by no means being an advocate for always being like, you need to forgive someone who's potentially done wrong against you. But I think within my case, it happened that way, and it made sense to me at the time. But I think
that's important framing, isn't it? Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah. It was weird to begin with, obviously, the fact that the stabbing happened. I had to identify the person who it was. Trauma was taking over my brain, so I was the only person who actually didn't identify who stabbed me. So everyone else had to kind of identify that person, and then meeting the person as well. And I think it really affected me to the point of not being able to go out. But I think through writing about the event and then performing it subsequently, and then speaking to amazing people like you about what happened, and it's first of all, I've made peace with it, but also I've been able to distance myself from it slightly. To the extent now that when I perform it, for example, at Camden Roundhouse, which is my show in October, I'll probably perform this stabbing poem, and I can perform it to 3,000 people, and it's kind of it's okay. And I think for me, if the reason I tell the story is because if we can continue the conversation about knife crime, then hopefully we can aim to do more about stopping it. It's an awful epidemic, and at the moment it seems to be that the numbers are getting worse and worse every single year. And I'm in no position to kind of say, oh, stop it, let's not do that. But I kind of hope you can continue the conversation just by speaking quite openly and candidly about it.
Are there any bits within that poem that you wish everybody could just have front and center when thinking about knife crime and what happened to you?
I don't know why, maybe it's not answering the question correctly, but I mentioned at the end of my section of the poem that I think about my mum and I think about family. And I think when it comes to knife crime, there's an amazing charity that's called, I'm going to butcher this, but it's something like Calling Home. And it's all about people who have just been stabbed, or people who are thinking about stabbing or thinking about carrying a knife. They have a shout out to their mums, because charities have often found that when people have just committed a crime like that, they do think about home and they think about mums specifically. And I think I wanted to resonate on that within the poem, which I did. And I think if there is a sort of telling factor, it's like before, picking up a knife or before committing a crime, or if you have been at the back end of that, you'll probably think about what's closest to you, and more often than that, it will be family. And I think maybe that's the tying factor.
And have you captured that within your words in the poem?
I think I have, yeah.
Yeah. Can you recite that? I
can, yeah. I think I say, for some reason, I think about my mum. I'm not sure why, but I just think about how I've grown a bit older, and since growing older, I've grown a bit bolder, and now admittedly growing a little bit colder. And then it resets into the next bit. But yeah, it was just sort of like a little thought afterwards, because that's what I did think about. I was in the ambulance, and I think they had like a fox in a field on the side of the ambulance, or on the inside. I think it's to calm you, apparently. But yeah, for me, I just sort of looked at that, and I started thinking about my mum and just the words I'd say to her since I last saw her. So yeah.
It's a very powerful insight, isn't it? That people immediately after a crime like that, whichever side you're on, you think about the things that you love the most. I feel like there's so much we could do as a society around just that insight alone. But actually, the real people at the heart of it, perhaps just misplaced at the wrong time, the wrong place. I love that point, how you frame that and capture that. So you talked about kind of the panic attacks that you experienced after, and almost like this, being chaperoned by your father at that age when you probably wanted to go and live your life as a teenager. Were the panic attacks, I assume, were incredibly physical? And were there particular triggers that you had? So was it like particular places, or like was it on travel, or like central London?
Yeah, it was always, if it was dark and I was walking home alone, distant figures who could probably be, a dad and his daughter would become distorted to me, and I'd think there was someone who was going to attack me, and I kind of ended up running a block that way and a block that way just to avoid it. Also, with anything to do with like physical exercise, I'd kind of, if I was breathing heavy, I'd be like, okay, it's happened again. I've had a spontaneous pneumothorax and my lungs collapsed, and that would trigger it. And the strangest thing now, because I'm openly a massive advocate for therapy, and having recently really got into it, I kind of think it's amazing, and I really do think it should be mandatory to people who want it at schooling level, and it should be free, and it shouldn't be a luxury. But I had no therapy during the time of getting stabbed, and I spoke to no one about it. They were just like, "How are you? You better?" And I was kind of like, "Yeah, I can breathe again." They were like, "Nice, you're good." And it's kind of the weird thing we don't speak about often is that if you go to physiotherapy to get better for your leg getting hurt in a football game, you tell people and they go, "Cool, you're getting better." If you tell someone you're going to therapy for your mind, they go, "What's wrong with you? Something's not quite right." And it kind of almost felt, for me to speak to someone about getting stabbed when I was 16, 17, 18, it was going to seem as a bit you're a bit weak, like move on, get on with it. And it's only now, having performed this poem and spoken to people like yourself, that I can see that it really affected me at the time. Like, to anyone who's had a panic attack, they're no joke. They can mimic heart attacks, they can mimic all these different things in your body as it goes into fight or flight. And it's I was really suffering with them, and it's only after time and writing and talking that I actually was able to get over it.
And also your words about time, it takes time. It's the same with therapy, really, because
Absolutely.
You don't really see the benefits or perhaps how you can restructure parts of how you live in your life or control some of the symptoms until you're living. And I think often we look for like quick fixes, because most things in life we now want quick fixes. But with therapy, it does take a considerable amount of time, and it takes reflection, and it takes actually having the right people around you to make sense of it. And I think you're spot on. It shouldn't be a privilege, but it is a privilege, isn't it? And I think when we think about the school system, I'm sure we'll go on to young people in a moment, I think that could be one of the most obvious and most probably economically wise decisions we can make as a society, is to have access freely available to therapy, regardless whether something is wrong or not, which is another insight you kind of get to. And that comparison of physical health and mental health, we're still not there yet, right? You still, if someone was to share that they're accessing therapy, we would still, in the back of our minds, I think the vast majority of people think, what's wrong then? Versus actually that person is trying to improve and better themselves. So you have accessed therapy recently, you mentioned, and how have you found that process?
I found it great. It was I'm a bit of a people pleaser, so I think at the start I was a bit like speaking to my therapist, and in the back of my head I was kind of like, am I being a good client? Am I being therapized well? Which is ridiculous, because it's just a space for you to be open and self-reflect. But I think it's great. It's definitely tough if you're a man or a woman who's not used to speaking to people quite openly, or even been given a space. I mean, you think about how often in life are we given 50 minutes to speak just openly? It's like really rare. So I think it definitely takes time. My therapist always says that it takes a minimum of 6 to sort of 10 sessions to be able to work things out. Whether that's a kind of way to keep me on board, I don't know. But I think the more I'm doing it, the more I'm kind of understanding about my own psyche and how much childhood has kind of come into play with all that stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I mean, I accessed therapy, and then that's how I realized I had a diagnosis of ADHD. And I wasn't going for that reason. I just knew that I needed to speak to someone about certain symptoms that I was feeling. Didn't want to put a name to it, but it was in the process of going through numerous rounds of talking to somebody external in my life that you then started to realize, well, actually it was incredibly blatantly obvious. That's why I almost spilled the water. But and I hold this under here to keep still. But like that realization process is something you kind of stays with you your whole life then. I think back to my childhood, and if only that was available to me much younger, how different that would have been. And also, like you say, not getting therapy for being stabbed is quite horrendous, really. But so that kind of moment then for you, going into your London life, 20s, into your music, like how much did your life change when you started to have an audience for the work that you have now? And you talked about So Far Sounds, is that right?
Yeah, So Far Sounds, yeah.
One of the pivotal moments you mentioned, I think.
Yeah, it was. So I left drama school and I started writing these poems, and then I sort of thought I didn't quite have a home for them yet on social media because I didn't have the confidence for it. But I thought, I love performing. Where can I perform these poems? And I found open mic nights. Like I said, that's how the BBC Radio 4 presenter person found me. And I found this great platform called So Far Sounds, which historically have had sort of, Ed Sheeran, Billie Eilish, Bastille, all these other people who have not necessarily started there, but along their journey, they've been part of it. And I started performing there, and I'd kind of, do it once a month and then once every 2 weeks, and really started kind of, in a way, like cutting my teeth on how to interact with a crowd, and if you mess up a line, how to kind of work it into what you're doing, and working out a bit of a set. And through there, like the overwhelming factor was that I really struggle with knowing something's good until, and this is probably not very healthy, but until potentially someone else says, like, you've done a good job, that's good. It's almost like I need that kind of validity from an external source to be like, what you're doing is of worth. It should come from yourself and just from me.
Even today?
I think more so today, I do write something, I go, no, I'm happy with that, this is good. But I think certainly at the start, I was really struggling with knowing my work's any good. And I really struggled with criticism, whether it's good or bad. I struggled with it. And I then started writing more work and taking it to social media, and I kind of I tried out different things. And if you look far back enough on my social media, you can see these, like, me on a keyboard or me just like rapping to camera. But I then came across this. I was sitting on the train one day, and I just came across filming an empty train seat. And I think at the time I wanted it to be kind of separate from me, so I just did my voice and an empty train seat. And I found that worked. This idea of, people do a lot of thinking on the train. They kind of do a lot of ruminating and figure stuff out. So to pair that with poems about running out of time, or poems about love or loss or mental health or mental clarity, really seemed to kind of strike a chord. And I kept replicating that. And then, as you said, this kind of, people started to relate to it, and everything grew from there. And it's amazing because absolutely these social media platforms are responsible for finding a really core, amazing fan base. And I'm so grateful for everyone who listens to my music and my poetry and reads my book. And I'm just excited for more things to come, basically.
It's powerful because I think you've kind of captured like feelings and emotions that multiple people are feeling at the same time. And like, what are some of the kind of core themes, would you say, that go across your work?
I'd say probably what I've said. I think certainly mental health is like a big one. And definitely themes that cover your 20s, the idea of being lost or living in a world of comparison. You can flick through social media and you can see these like 19-year-old millionaires living in Dubai being like, oh, you can get rich too if you join my pyramid scheme. And it's kind of like, it's really tough because you live in a world where you might not have the perfect hairline or perfect teeth or whatever it is, and you therefore think you're different or other or wrong. And I kind of wanted to encapsulate that all in the book and in my music. So I think the idea of growing older, what change happens along the way, leaving people behind, whether it's lovers or friends, getting into relationships. I write a lot about love. I'm a massive romantic at heart, and I'll happily say that. And then, things to do with going through your 20s and trying to figure it out. So I think that's the core of what I kind of write about.
Yeah, nice. And that so love, relationships, 20s. Is this like an amalgamation of your own experiences, friends? Like, how have you got to some of the points that you have done on the reflections in your work?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's to do with what I've just seen my friends and peers getting up to, and obviously a lot to do with me as well. I think a lot of the work I write about is also fictitious and comes from a place of wanting to understand things better. So I write about being married and how someone else is married. I'm not married, but I can delve into that, and I really love tapping into places that I don't necessarily know firsthand, but I can understand. You spoke earlier about how you're a parent. I've written through the eyes of being a dad or whatever it is, but I've not necessarily been there before. And I think that's the beauty of being able to write. You can go into this place of imagination, but then obviously I've also gone through heartbreak, and I've gone through love, and I've gone through mental health battles, and it's nice to be able to find a place to write about that.
Yeah, the chalk on the wall gets me.
Yeah.
It's quite powerful.
Yeah, I love that song, and I'm glad that you referenced that. Yeah,
that's the bit that gets me as a parent, because it then takes you to two places at the same time, because you're watching somebody grow old right in front of you, who is getting very tall. My daughter's 2.5 years old, and I've got a 7-month-old as well. I've got 2 children, and but I'm just out of my 20s. So then you're there thinking how quickly that time goes, and how the physical showing of height is really interesting, but also to show that will they come back there? Or will they come back to see that height? And I'm not even alive for 2.5 years, and I find myself thinking like that. But it's I think you have captured those kind of deep feelings you get during parenthood, because it's kind of a wish-wash of so many different things, and you haven't got it together yourself. I'm referring to, then you're having to look after 2 children at the same time. And I think there is a weird moment that happens, at least for me as a parent, where you are trying to make sense of your own identity. You're trying to kind of build a future for kind of your young people looking at your life, but then you're also realizing there were faults in that.
100%.
There are some amazing moments 100%. In that. And I think, that kind of like the chalk way is actually like quite nostalgic, I think is the word I'm trying to find. And I think like we need more of that, like to remember what actually our childhood were. Actually, there was a lot of beauty in that. Like, yes, there are things that we wish our parents probably knew, or we wish we had more access to education. But I think today's world feels quite difficult. I think it feels quite everyday, and I feel like people are perhaps struggling to remember that life is for living. And I think your words have done that really well for parents. And you're not a parent, which is quite powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean that's massive praise coming from you as a parent. So thank you so much.
So let's talk about some of the kind of points around masculinity that bring up in your work. So I kind of took note of a few. Men were meant for biting down their tongue, not letting nothing up, such as us. Boys becoming blokes will never soften us. Like, what inspired that line? Like, can you broaden that for us?
Yeah, I think for me growing up, when I came to London, I went to an all boys school, and it was kind of the idea that if you're going through a mental battle or struggle, you just need to kind of like not talk about it, because if you do speak about it, you're going to get made fun of for doing so. And young boys are really impressionable, and we've seen the power of that, but also the power of art with Netflix's Adolescence, and kind of how young boys really can be steered a certain direction through what they see online. And I think I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of toxic masculine sort of toxic masculinity that we see online through certain figures. And I think these are the kind of behaviors that we need to kind of stray away from. And I think for me, when I was growing up, it was very much sports related at school. And it was kind of this toxic masculinity of kind of, oh, you need to do sports and that makes you cool and that makes you popular. Don't speak about how you're feeling. And that was the overriding thought just throughout my whole teenage life. So when it came down to writing the Button Up, which is the song you're referring to, I absolutely felt that. I was like, men are meant for biting down their tongue, not speaking about anything, because that's what it is to be a man. And it's so funny how when I was younger, I thought, to be a man is all these kind of like traditional things that people think, they're very like strong and masculine, and you talk with a deep voice or whatever. But now I think it's just to have the confidence to be where you're at the moment. If you're Jamie Lang and you're going to cry at the end of a marathon, I think that's the most masculine, incredible thing. If you want to be macho in the moment, then that can be the masculine thing. If you want to be vulnerable with someone, that's a masculine thing. And I think that process of boys to men was what I wanted to write about, because as a boy, I had this one idea of what it is, which is very probably toxic and everything else. And as a man, I have a different idea, which is hopefully more towards the positive side.
It's nice that kind of not letting nothing up point is like, it's almost like we had a generation of young boys seeing that not letting nothing up was the right thing to do. And now I think there is a trend, or hopefully at least a change in that system, that actually openness is good, openness is important, and actually that still makes you a man. 100%, which I really like. And I think I definitely relate to that. Powering into sport, that was the event, every sport under the sun, and it was a release. I think I always describe it as the best and worst thing for my mental health. Best in that it gave me the release in the moment that probably got me through each day. The worst because I got so used to having that as a release that I didn't need anything else, but actually I was struggling relentlessly inside for years and years and years. And it wasn't until I started letting up, I guess, in time, that you realize that actually what makes you, the man that you are, is actually hidden by hiding it. And actually,
absolutely.
I was a completely different person as soon as I kind of started speaking up. And so I think there is hopefully a generation of young boys that feel like they can, but I definitely hear you. Like there needs to be careful watching of social media to make sure that we are creating those spaces for men to see the right voices.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so on mental health, you mentioned some of your own mental health battles. How has that infused into your work? Are there particular songs that you would kind of pinpoint?
I think the song you just mentioned, Button Up, was probably the first one I really took on this like mental health journey where I speak about how I felt and how I mentioned therapy and I mentioned being silent in your room and just closing the curtains to the world. I think certainly in my song Chalk that I did with Delilah Montague, who did a great song with Fred again a few years back. There, when I speak about marks on the wall and returning back home and seeing how much you've grown or potentially how much you haven't grown, you know, this idea of I think when we're younger we have these dreams of what we want to do and where we're going to be. And I think sometimes it can be wonderful to reflect, but it can also be quite sad. You kind of think, I had so much back then that I didn't realize. I was surrounded by my family. I was, hopefully happy and healthy. I'm speaking of my own childhood, but it's, it can be really tough. And I found that always going back to art and writing was just such a nice way to like speak about my own mental health battles and struggles. But yeah, I've also got my album coming out, which is coming out in February. Next February, and I speak more candidly about sort of my own struggles and battles in that. So hopefully it can inspire other people to do the same.
Powerful. And I like the fact that actually not all of this started, but a lot of it started from that you on a train without you to camera. Is there something about the kind of commute that you had in mind when you were writing some of your pieces? This everyday monotonous nature of work and life, because I feel it a bit in your work.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I think that's why the same kind of 6 chord structure that's in the background music that you can just about hear, and it kind of just like that cycle is kind of what I wanted to build in and ingrain in people's mind. And then I think also, the way I speak in my poems, it's very kind of low and slow, and it's this grind and what we're kind of going through. And I think I absolutely wanted to have that. And the main thing I wanted to do was having some kind of movement and chaos of the train moving, but then the stillness of the words and the sea. And I think that's certainly what life feels like for a 20-year-old. You've got all these options and all these things moving, but then more often than not, because there is so much, you fall into this state of option paralysis where there's so much to choose from, and so I'll choose nothing. I'll just stay inside and I won't do any of it. And I kind of wanted to get that across in most of my poems. And
you really capture this idea of running out of time really, really well. And it comes through most pieces, right? Not maybe, I think if I was to kind of phrase a phrase, I don't want to settle, I put that very high. I would also just say, you're running out of time when you're not running out of time as well too in that.
Honestly, that's why I wanted to call the book to start with.
Really?
But
that's interesting, isn't it?
that was my top option. But I got vetoed, and I was like, "Come on, yeah." The rest of my team sort of thought we want to move on.
It's does it ever stop this idea? Do you think of running out? You feel like you're running out of time? Because I think I do. I think I've tried to force so much into a short period of time because I live by the day thinking that the next day's not coming, and I don't know sometimes if that's to do with my childhood because I realize that life can change in a matter of hours and you can lose somebody. But also, I then started thinking about, well, actually, if I'm going to have no regrets, I need to force everything into a short period of time. And I sometimes think, where does that come from? Has that come from the fact that I've grown up, with social media for a long period of time in my 20s and living in London and comparing myself? But it's so interesting, this insight, and how it's not healthy. It can drive you, but at the same time, finding peace within a chaotic world around slowing down is so hard. I think it's easier to go fast than it is to slow down.
I think it's I completely agree with you, and I think I spoke to my dad about this, who's in his early 60s, and he was saying that he's never had this feeling of running out of time. So he's just one example, but I really do worry that or I do think that maybe social media is potentially the driving force, where we can see millions of different lives every single day at our fingertips, and naturally we fall into this idea of comparison. And I think the comparison is breeding this idea of, I need to fit more in, I need to do more, I need to move to here or there, I need to show people the edited highlights, the best bits. And I think that's creating this worry and this anxiety of, oh God, I'm running out of time. I don't have enough time to do it. I've also seen it turn into like health anxiety. People are worried they're going to have kind of, problems going on inside them. So they need to fit as much in as possible.
Yeah.
And it can just relay in loads of really dangerous ways. And I think at the moment I'm trying to spend more time away from my phone, which I'm sure you get this, but like seemingly if a lot of your life is on social media through work, it's really difficult. And I definitely have addictions with my phone and kind of picking it up and checking in it. And it's not good for your head. And it really does, I think, further this idea of running out of time, because you're literally checking your time every 5 seconds. So how can you not logically think you're running out of it,
Yeah. If that's the most given thing that happens in our day, it's that we will have our time.
100%.
Then we're always going to be aware of it. When actually it's a completely made up concept, right?
Yeah, completely.
Which is probably a different podcast, different day. but it's my therapist once described my inability to default to my childlike behaviors, and it always stuck with me, partly in the name of the podcast, but it also stuck with me because I realized how slow life was. I realized how disconnected I was. I lived in the countryside, and how then I physically was unable to slow down. And what I like about your work is that I think it does allow, I think my heart rate drops, even if I'm doing something that's exercise based. And I think there is something around connecting movement and music or spoken word. I don't know the right kind of phrasing is to put. But which I feel like you're completely onto. And I obviously as a career, but I mean more from a therapeutic, calming aspect for young people in a space. Do you think there's any opportunity for you to kind of carve out kind of your work into therapeutic landscape, such as bringing groups of people together to talk about some of these topics, such as trauma or loss?
I think that's a wonderful point. I've never really thought about it from that perspective, but I think I've definitely found that there's a community that's been growing, whether it's online and people messaging me saying, oh, I had someone the other day say, I lost my brother a year ago, and you're writing about loss and grief and, hoping to find kind of stability and happiness again has really helped me through it. And first of all, like, thank you for sharing that with me. Second of all, like, I'm really happy that, work in general, someone's at work can help you like that. But I think, it really does make me think there could be room for this kind of community.
Yeah.
And I've done things like sound baths and through like friends where you can get people together and kind of, I speak some poetry and
I can see how that works.
Just help people kind of like slow down and meditate and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I've never done it in the form of kind of like, open spaces and talking. But yeah, I might now. That's a pretty good idea.
Do you worry? I know a lot is around this kind of 20s point, and it's deeper than that. But like, those teenagers now, or young people going through the schooling system, do you worry about young people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if I thought it was bad for myself or bad for you in terms of, this idea of running out of time or ability to reach therapy and other things for your mental health, I think it's going to be way worse for people who are younger. So much more is going to be fixated on your phone. So much more is going to be fixated on whether you're cool or not. And even it taking back to like social media, if someone's going to make fun of you online, which kids do, right? Kids are mean. But if to have someone be able to like something and have potentially 100 people think in your head exactly the same thing, it's so damaging. So I do worry, and I just hope that, potentially, like I said earlier, there is going to be mandatory availability for therapy within schools and, and other places like that.
Would you ban social media for under 16s if you could?
No, because I mean, there's so much good that comes from it as well. There's so much informative learning that comes through social media, and it's a way to connect with other people and connect with things you love and you like and passions, etc. But I think to be able to regulate it in a certain way would be really helpful and probably be a good thing. But also just have lessons in it. I mean, like, be in school and teach people about the dangers of social media. Teach people about, people will say things online, they don't really mean it. When Juggernaut 47 from wherever tells you that your poetry is rubbish, like, it's not to take it to heart.
Yeah.
And I will hand on heart say, for some reason, 100 lovely things that someone says will be taken away from one bad thing. And that's just the way it makes up in my head. But if you can tell someone it's going to be okay, they don't really mean it, or, whatever it is, then I think that's a really positive thing to kind of instill in kids at school.
Yeah. It's that strange cognitive distortion, isn't it? That we remember the random kind of comments that are not favourable.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, miss the rest. What about kind of dating and young people? You talk a lot around love and relationship and loss referring to relationships.
Yeah.
I met my partner. She was my next door neighbour. It was a shared communal space in central London, and I'd have a cup of tea, and I would be there. I used to work for a brand not too dissimilar to Gillette, I guess. It's kind of mammoth machine businesses, and I was very branded up all the time. And I always remember I'd get my cup of tea with my branded t-shirt on, and I would just speak to my partner. And I remember now how real that experience was of meeting her in a way that was everyday, normal. I was working, being myself. And I feel like we lost a bit of that, this kind of ability to connect as human beings living our everyday life. And so much as that moved onto the kind of digital space. And you talk a lot about that. What are your kind of overarching reflections and worries for young people growing up in a digital space when it comes to relationships and dating?
I think one of my biggest thoughts is that when it comes to dating, and especially like breakups, there's the weird realization that you're literally mourning someone who's very much still alive. So it's a type of grief. The grief of losing someone through death is, they're gone and you have to make peace with that. But to potentially still see someone day to day online after you've broken up can be really damaging. You can really struggle to let someone go. And I think with young people specifically, because we're going to be so online, everything is completely moving to social media. To go through a breakup, to go through loss, and then have it shoved in your face, potentially their new partner, how happy they now are, how they're being treated better than they were before. It can be really damaging. And I think to have that kind of pushed in your face so openly is going to be a real struggle for young people. I think also with just in love in general, like, the idea of keeping things quite private and to yourself is now going to belong more in the public kind of sphere. You want to show people that you're in love. Look how happy I am. So you'll start, posting it more online and stuff like that. And that can be great for you. It can be wonderful, but it can also be damaging to people who don't have that, who are missing that kind of love, and they can once again start comparing themselves. I don't think there's any answers to this. I think that's just the reality. That's what it is. And also, like, if I'm honest, if people don't want to do that, they're not going to do it. They'll just be like, I don't adhere to these rules. I don't want to take part in that. I've got loads of friends who aren't on social media, and they're, happy as they can, probably happier than people who are. But I think my thoughts on love and on loss is that, I think love is a wonderful thing to have for those who've experienced it. And I think, while you're in it and while you have it, just soak it up for everything that it is. And as I said earlier, with, if you've broken up with someone, time takes time. So just, going through that. And sadly, no one can hold your hand through grief. You kind of need to walk through it alone. I think I've often tried to look for people through grief and kind of do that. And, friends can absolutely help you through it. But I think the main heavy lifting needs to come from you. And I can come with, going out, sport, and just keeping yourself busy, basically. Yeah,
the heavy lifting comes from you. It's true, isn't it? And you're kind of sitting in the moment and knowing that time is going to take its process on you. But at the same time, surrounding yourself with the right things and people.
Absolutely.
Although no one can change kind of what happened to us from our family's perspectives, are there kind of particular people or things that people said to you that you'll always kind of remember, kind of stuck with you?
I think one of the big ones I've always had, and I speak about it in the book, is that my dad's always said that your mum was kind of the person for me, and he was like, she was my person, and he hasn't sort of dated anyone since. And I think that's very particular to my dad. I don't think that's anything that everyone needs to do. But what I loved is one time I was really upset about my mum, and I was kind of really, really, thinking about her, and I was deeply sad that I wasn't going to have that connection with someone again, in terms of a real mother, someone who's related to me like that. And I think it seems really obvious, but he just said, she's always with you, whether it's the memories you keep or the way you look in a mirror and you have the same eyes, all these little things that no one can take away from you. No one can take the memories away from you. And I think that's always just made me feel a bit brighter about it. And my partner at the moment is going through, her mum died sort of 3 weeks ago. And strangely enough, in the same hospice that my mum died in. So that brought about a whole host of memories and realizations. And it's really strange seeing someone in real time as an adult go through deep loss of a parent. Because I, in some ways, for better or for worse, lost my mum at the age of 8. And I didn't know her in an intellectual level. I didn't know what made her laugh or made her cry. I just knew that I needed her and I loved her. And I keep saying to her in hopes of something, she's always going to be with you in a way. And that's not in some deeper spiritual level. I think it's just that, we do wear our parents. And I think there's something nice in that.
Yeah, so much in there. And that idea that they're always kind of here with you, whether not in physical nature, but in what you do and what you say and how you act and how you think, I think is really powerful. And I think that does take time again to realize as you grow old and you become a parent or whatever you're doing in your work or relationships, you start to then show these characteristics that you may have learned even in a very young age. And I sometimes, so I lost my dad when I was 12, so very, very similar. And in fact, I think I found myself grieving what could have been, not what I lost. I don't have a huge amount of memories, which I struggle with. I was part of a charity campaign by Calm, the campaign against living miserably, and I was asked to find the last photo of my dad. And obviously, if you ask me to find the last photo of anyone now, it's very easy. I can go onto my phone and I can go onto my iPhone and I can easily find it. I had to dig deep on archives because there was just there were no photos available. And my gran happened to have this photo on her laptop, which we were able to work out was the last photo. I miss that. I wish I'd had captured more of those moments, if that makes sense. But now we're going to have so much of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good thing because I think we can look back at those that we lost and think, well, what were they doing as a young guy growing up? What were some of the values that they showed or the behaviors they showed as they were going into adulthood? For someone who does lose a parent and they want to know, I want to know what my mum or dad was doing when they were a teenager. Hopefully we'll have more now versus having to perhaps make sense of it. And I think there could be some benefit in that. So we got some recurring questions, which I'm going to ask you in a moment's time. But I guess I wanted to ask you if there's like a poem, a lyric, or like a line you think that crystallizes the message around like young people, especially young boys growing into today's world that you perhaps wanted to share with us today.
Yeah. It was one of the first songs that I released. It's called Young Minds. It's kind of the opening line. It kind of goes, it's a false thought to young minds. Irony of being in your 20s, but feeling like you're running out of time. And I think it's just that idea of like worrying you're running out of time when you've got so much ahead of you, and there's no need to kind of fear that you need to cram everything in because, you've got everything to come, basically.
I love it. Amazing. So I'm going to run through some of our recurring questions now. You can answer these in short fire or kind of elaborate naturally how you want to. So what's one societal rule you'd completely erase or rewrite if you could?
I guess at school, how boys are told they can't speak about their feelings and their emotions.
And what's one belief you used to hold about mental health or happiness that you've since let go of?
That happiness is a constant and that you always need to remain at that one level, that you're not allowed to dip into sadness.
Because then you wouldn't know what happiness is. See, these questions are good.
That's great.
I don't doubt them sometimes. They think they're good. And I think so. Like you're very open. But we do ask guests this. So what's something you've never or rarely shared publicly, but perhaps feel ready to now?
I think I've never said it. It's kind of woven into my work, but that I really struggle with comparison, especially with other artists and poets. And I'm kind of trying to work my way through it just by having more belief in my own work. But I've really struggled with that in the past. I think it's getting better now, but I've definitely struggled with it.
Thank you for sharing that. That's quite interesting what you were saying earlier around that kind of not need, but like you like people to say that your work is good. And it's working. That's very interesting, isn't it? That's your perception of that. Yeah, I see your work is like completely creme de la creme.
Yeah, thank you.
Nothing changed. Keep going, keep doing more and more. That's really pretty powerful.
It's probably just insecurities, to be honest, isn't it? Just like they just live.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight, isn't it, to how people's minds work?
Absolutely, completely.
Okay, so let's say we record this episode again in 2035. What do you hope we're talking about, or perhaps what do you worry we could be talking about?
I think probably just like the rise of online bullying that's just gone to such an extent that it's really detrimental. We might be speaking about how the NHS is no longer and how everything's gone privatized and to basically. I really hope how we're speaking about how there's mandatory therapy in schools. That would be incredible. And how Chelsea won the treble.
Chelsea won the treble. We're doing so well on this episode. And final question.
Yeah.
So we ask every guest to reflect on their thoughts around AI. in the future and what it might mean for them, their work, and those that they love.
I've had interactions with it recently where someone, from the bad side of it, someone created a AI videos of myself and were reaching out to people who follow me asking for money and trying to scam them essentially. So a very good AI of me being like, "Hi, it's Dan. Can you do this for me?" Blah blah blah. I think it can be really dangerous in terms of making people look like they're doing things that they're not. We've seen it quite a lot recently. At the moment, I think it's being online used more to the kind of comedic route, but we don't know the dark end of it. I think it can be really brilliant in terms of if you work with it, helping you with maximizing your output, helping with being economical. I haven't used it yet, but people have said, "Oh, you can use it for prompts about what to write poems about, what to write songs about." Apparently, you can ask it to write something in the style of something else. So if you're, for me, if I got writer's block, I could use it like that. But I'm forever in love with the idea that art comes from artists rather than from an algorithm, and I don't really want to break that, but it's inevitable, right? And you kind of need to accept it. For my loved ones, I hope that it never gets to a bad place of defamation of character or anything like that. But also one day as a guy who wants to have kids, I kind of worry about what that will mean for my kids because it will only be more advanced then. But if I'm honest, I don't know too much about it, so I need to probably research a bit more. But,
No, that's very. It's nice.
What
nice
do you think? What do you think about it all?
I think in time, and I hope it will have its advances with people having more time to do things that they are wanting to get to now, if that makes sense. But I think there will be a middle ground of kind of pain and turbulence, which will probably impact the job market, which I think we're already seeing, quite significant like redundancies in jobs that were kind of so desperately needed, but so quickly overnight that we can accept that, essentially a machine can do that job and therefore people are therefore not needed. It doesn't feel right. Companies can make redundancies normally because they are struggling financially, and it makes complete sense at those points. But when businesses aren't struggling financially and they are therefore quickly replicating ease and efficiency, what about all these people that are left? How do they find purpose, meaning? Do we transfer them to new roles or new jobs that perhaps don't exist, or do we find purpose in something completely different? But then how do we sustain and live and completely finance ourselves? So I think there's going to be this very significant period of turbulence. But I think on the points you were saying around even like prompts on helping kind of get people to their kind of creative maximization, I guess I can see how that works. But really that like the beauty is in what comes from your mind and the time that you spend.
Completely agree.
But I hope it gives people more space for things that they love and they have meaning for. But I think there'll be a messy period. But thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed speaking with you. There was so much in your dotted history between career, personal life, kind of bit of sport, your future aspirations. Of course, you have your amazing book. Would strongly encourage everyone to read this. I listened to the audiobook of it. It was a delight. Really nice to hear kind of guess the how you kind of brought your music into your book as well. It was natural because I was listening to your music. I could then relate very easily. So yeah, really enjoyed that. And yeah, looking forward to the new album. When does it come out?
It comes out February the 13th, so Valentine's Day, I believe.
February the 13th. That was on for that reason?
Yeah, sort of, yeah. I think it's kind of encapsulating everything that my work has. So yeah, it comes out February 13th, and then the tour starts on 21st of October in Bristol.
October. Nice. So where do you go? Quite quick fire.
So UK, and then we go over to Europe. We're doing Paris, Amsterdam, Berlin, Cologne, and then fly over to Miami. We do Miami, New York, Chicago, Toronto, Los Angeles. So we're away for about a month, and then and then December probably just gonna be a lot of tour, album push and promo, and
And next year, so you obviously got the album.
We got the album, and then after the album, we'll probably be touring the album, which will be exciting. Going back to the same places, and then festival season, and then who knows, maybe another tour, maybe another book, maybe more work. I don't really know. So,
see what happens.
Absolutely, see what happens. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for everything that you do. And
thank you for having me.
Such a space for people to reflect and think deeper about who they are and their meaning and their future. And I'm very, very grateful for what you do.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Cheers. What an amazing episode. He's such a likable person, very honest and genuine in his character and in his demeanor. I'm someone who's gained a lot from listening to Dan speak over the years, really. I love his open-mindedness. I love how broad he takes the themes of trauma, I guess, and loss. Trauma and loss mean something very different and personal to each person. But he does give hope I think, to people who are experiencing trauma and loss. And, very grateful for all of the words that he's shared and have helped me on numerous runs and self-reflection going into work. But more importantly, I can't help but think how, if we all as a society had that level of open-mindedness and willingness to give people a second chance, that actually we'd have a much fairer and supportive society. To be stabbed at 16 years old, of course, is incredibly traumatic. And I love the process that he went through to speak to the person that did that, but also how that person is kind of rebuilding and reshaping their life and able to communicate with each other. It's just incredible. And how amazing that process exists. I don't hear enough of that. And I'm sure there are some amazing stories out there, which I'd love to hear. Dan is somebody that has used his trauma to create strength and support for not only him, his family, but also for many, many other people. I don't think it's any surprise that he's doing as well as he is. I think he will continue to go from strength to strength, but I can see how his style and his work could actually be very, very well set up in other forms of settings. So what I mean by that is, imagine if we could create this ability to connect quite deeply through movement and spoken word in the world of sports or in our school systems. I was barely able to access therapy as a young boy going through school when I was most definitely in need of it. I, of course, had access to therapy at various points, but was I wanting to access it? No. But if there was role models like Dan for young boys now, people who are able to talk about sport and play sport, yet also be very articulate and open about their emotions, is exactly the type of role model that we need. And his life has not been easy. He's had to create his own luck. And I think there's almost learning in his story around vulnerability and finding your own way through, setting your own milestones. But actually, good things do come to good people. But actually, forcing that and feeling like time is running out is kind of the point that he's kind of getting at here, is that is part of the problem that we have in our society, is that we want things quickly and we perhaps want what others have, and how social media plays a role in all that. So actually where I'm getting to with all of this is actually, is there a way that we can bring what Dan is doing in society through his kind of open word and his powerful kind of articulation of emotions into other realms where young people most definitely need to hear it? So I'm excited to see what he goes on to do. What I love is his way of capturing the experiences of young boys becoming men. I think this is an incredibly important area for us as a society, and most definitely the world of politics, to focus on. Are we doing enough to protect young boys going out into the world that is today? And we have seen amazing forms of art, really, created, especially everyone talks about adolescence, and of course, rightly so. But what that does is it captures the experiences of young boys. Young boys are perhaps misunderstood, with not with the right level of support and access. What can happen? And whilst we may turn to role models as the answer, and of course we have to, I think we also need to look quite deeply into the way in which we're speaking and creating environments for young boys to talk, be open, and share their feelings. And spoken word music, have we seen that as a realm, I guess, for people to share their experiences? It's starting to become popular, of course, and forms of it have, of course, been around for a long period of time. But I can see how we could take the learnings into our school systems. But I could think what he also shares is, very honest reflections on AI, and also how he gets to his place of creativity. He talked about no notifications on his phone and how important that is. And actually, if we feel like time is running out, but all we have is, a watch on our wrist and looking at our time on our phones, then of course we're always going to have time as the front and center of whatever we're doing. And how can we find escapes for us in society to almost escape time, to escape these moments of rush and that feeling that we're always having to be on? And we talk about, cities especially creating that fear that we're going at such a pace, and it does do that. But we need to find these almost like sanctuaries to slow down. And having sanctuaries to slow down are not just in the physical space, but also digitally as well. And I think, of course, there's a lot of conversation now around how we protect young people from some of the harms on social media. And I think we quite quickly go to the content that's being absorbed. But I think we also need to look at the amount of time and the frequency and how embedded that is into our daily lives. So to wrap that up, Dan has opened, I guess, my mind to a whole host of different thoughts around how we bring this form of art into the world of therapy and into the lives of young people. And I'm very grateful for how he has done that in a way that he has never lost himself in that. He is himself, and you can see that in his character and his demeanor. So yeah, what an amazing person, an amazing guy. And I'm sure and hope we'll get him on the show again. Thank you.